We've still got people joining. All right, we have 15 people. Hasn't been going up, so if we can get started.
Okay, welcome everybody to the November 24th, 2020 meeting of the BAR Small. My name is Jay Claypool. I'm going to chair tonight's meeting. With me is a full board, Glenn Gardner, Fillmore Wilson, Julia Martin, and Bill Huey. City staff present for the meeting is Kim Lavin and Alex Howe. The order of the meeting will be as follows. Staff will give a brief introduction to the project, after which time the applicant and anyone speaking on behalf of the applicant can present for 10 minutes. Everyone speaking, please state your name clearly for the record. The public comment period will then open. Again, anyone providing public comment, please state your name clearly for the record. I have a number of written public comments that I'll read into the record. I'll allow anyone speaking in person to speak first, then I'll begin to read the letters we've received. After the public comment period, we'll hear from staff as to its comments and ultimately its recommendation. After all of that information is put forward, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to public comments, staff comments, etc. And that's just simply to respond. That's not to reopen the presentation. The floor closes at that point. The board will discuss the matter and ultimately vote. The board is free to ask questions of the applicant, public of anyone at any time, and we tend to ask those questions right on the heels of the applicant's presentation. There were 4 originally published agenda items that have been either withdrawn or deferred, and so we're not going to hear the following items tonight. Agenda item number 5, 182 Trad, number 6, 7 Limehouse, number 7, 89 Spring, and number 8, 60 Nassau. We're not going to hear any of those tonight. Please turn your ringers off. And lastly, please limit any comments to architecture and architecture only. And now we'll hear a little bit about virtual meeting protocol.
Thank you. Yeah, the meeting protocol. Staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees that are not board members or staff will only be given capabilities to speak when they are called on during public comment period. Chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. For public comment, the applicants and all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in in-person meetings, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item that they have commented on. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. The board members will be polled by the chair for comments and their vote on a motion. Each member when voting should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chairman shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chairman if he has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, he will temporarily be removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. Or she, in our case tonight. If the board needs to go into executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they're ready to return to the regular meeting. Staff will issue meeting results, including staff comments and board motion to the applicant following the meeting. Results will also be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. For additional information, you can contact BAR at charleston-sc.gov. or visit our website if you're experiencing technical difficulties during the meeting. These proceedings are being recorded.
All right, first agenda item is 139 Wentworth.
139 Wentworth is requesting approval for demolition of existing structure. The building's not rated in the Charleston Village neighborhood pre-1902 and in the Old and Historic District. Here's a context aerial image of the building on the south side of Wentworth between Smith and Pitt Streets, right near the Wentworth Mansion. And some context images for you, courtesy of Google. It's looking east on Wentworth, and looking west. And with that, if the applicant wants to take it from here.
Excuse me for interrupting. I'm recused on this. I think I need to be.
Yes, I'll put you on hold. I forgot to do that.
Okay. This is Jeremy Tate with Metters, and I'm joined by Brittany Smith, and also with Metters. And we'd like to thank you for hearing this application. We last presented this August the 13th to 2020, and ultimately the meeting, the vote was to defer for some additional information regarding the streetscape of the replacement building. As Kim staff mentioned, we are seeking demolition of the structure. And I will run through the presentation quickly, kind of refresh the board on the project. Kim, could you move it forward 2 slides, please? Yeah. So as Kim pointed out, this is the building, an aerial photograph on the left and a bird's eye view on the right. That view on the right is looking south from above. Next slide, please. And again, images that are from Wentworth Street looking south. The building is a 2-story building. The door in the center accesses a first floor, almost like a large studio apartment. And then the door on the right, kind of west side, goes upstairs to a second floor multi-bedroom apartment complex. The building does adjoin neighbor and actually touches, the veneer touches 141 Wentworth here at the street, and we'll go around the building. It doesn't really, the wall behind it doesn't touch. It just kind of parallels 141, and there's flashing that kind of covers part of the joint. And then as it adjoins 137, you can see here that it's set away approximately 10 inches, and then it kind of corbels at about the second floor level to kind of close that gap. Next slide, please. This is just detail shots of how the brick veneer kind of laps over the face of the more historic brick at 141, and the mortar joint is kind of touching 141. Next slide, please. And then how the veneer wraps the cornice of 141. Next slide. And a close-up view looking between 137 to the east and 139. And then the picture on the right, just again looking at the composition of that east wall at the first floor, which is a modern CMU wall, and then behind that modern framing that supports gypsum. And we'll see some of those pictures in a moment. Next slide, please. Then same location, but now looking up towards the sky, and we're beginning to see the siding of the second floor, and then it's a tight squeeze. 137 is an enclosed porch as well in this location, and it appears that this scenario existed prior to 1902 Sanborn maps. It's been kind of in this kind of configuration in terms of proximity of 139 to 137's enclosed porch. Next slide, please. This is kind of moving to the rear of the structure, looking west, and the picture that you're seeing on the left is the eastern rear face of 139, and then the picture on the right is beginning to kind of coming around the backside of 139, and then you're seeing 141's brick off in the distance. Next slide. Both of these are at the rear, and it shows the little bit of metal flashing and membrane roofing from 139 and how it laps onto 141 and conceals or covers the joint between those two structures. Next slide, please. Interior shots. The building in 2016 was most recently remodeled, where a lot of this first floor was opened up to create this more contemporary expanse. We've been trying to piece together exactly what has happened here, but it's pretty well opened up in modern construction through here. Next slide, please. More detail shots. Next slide. As you move upstairs, it's not as open. There's the stairs going down to Wentworth are in that picture on the left. And then you come to kind of a central space, a living room, so to speak, with some bedrooms on the eastern side, front and rear, and the kitchen at the rear. The picture on the right shows the kitchen. Next slide, please. Typical bedroom. Next slide. Bathroom and a bedroom. Next slide. We did an infrared analysis of the building to kind of scan for anomalies that might reveal potential historic fabric or areas that we would want to open up. And as we presented last time, we opened these areas up to explore the potential for historic fabric. On the first floor, that boxed area is looking at the northeast corner. That's metal framing. Behind the gypsum, bad insulation. And then behind that would be CMU wall. Next slide. And there's the CMU wall. Next slide, please. That same concept goes kind of around the first floor. Next slide. And at the front, looking up at the ceiling, we cut a hatch, and it just revealed some modern framing in the floor system in this location. Next slide. We did move over approximately 6 feet and cut another hole, and then it did reveal that there was some historic framing in the floor joist in this location. Next slide. And there's a close-up of that there in the center of the picture. Next slide. The infrared camera, we pointed it on the second floor. Actually, it's the first floor, sorry. The wall that would separate the first floor unit from the second floor stairs, and then the wall that adjoins 141, and it revealed repetitive, consistent framing, and as we explored it, it was more modern construction there. Next slide. Moving up to the second floor, we cut a hole in the wall there on the northeast corner and did find a corner brace. So there is more historic fabric in the framing elements along that east wall, as you'll see in the next several slides. Next, please. In the ceiling here, we cut a hole there to look up at the roof. It's mostly modern framing. The next slide. There is a few elements where there's more historic fabric kind of in the interstitial space between the ceiling joists and the roof framing. You can see the roof sheathing is plywood. So there's limited historic fabric kind of above this area. Next slide, please. Another diagonal brace along the middle of the east wall, second floor. Next slide. And then as we move to the rear, it's all modern framing, modern sheathing, and then a finish on all the finishes on the exterior are more recent elements from the 1975 renovation. Next slide, please.
Jeremy, you're running up against your time, so I just want to make sure you got a chance to say what you want to say.
Thank you. If you could just keep progressing forward through these, keep going. We did some Sanborn analysis, which we presented last meeting. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. And keep going. All right. So we did a massing diagram we presented last time. The intent is to build a single family structure that will exist on the same footprint as the current building, but be elevated 4 feet for FEMA requirements. Next slide. Keep going. We were looking at context of solid void in the relationship of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Next slide. That shows the existing footprint, proposed footprint. Next slide. And these are the options for replacement building that we're starting to consider the solid void relationships of that street elevation. We're starting to look at respecting with a reveal 139 to 141 and staying completely separate from 137. And certainly the building behind this, we will begin to study at a conceptual level. I want to remind that we're here for demolition. Our next phase, if demolition is approved, would be to take this to the zoning board. We've spoken to them now, but until this board makes a decision, we can't really go to them officially for a zoning variance for a non-conforming building. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Questions of Jeremy or maybe even Brittany, I guess, anybody at this point? If there are no questions, we'll go to public comment.
We have 3 members of the public speaking. We'll start with April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for the demolition of 139 Wentworth Street, and we've met with the applicant as well as the neighbors. We are concerned about this application. Because the proposed new construction is not submitted as part of this application, it is possible that demolition could result in either a less compatible new structure or a long period in which the parcel will be vacant. Because of its height, scale, and mass, the existing structure contributes to the historic character of this section of Wentworth Street, and its loss would result in an unfortunate gap in the small row of historic structures. Additionally, enough historic fabric remains that it is still possible to identify the former pharmacy in the existing structure. We greatly appreciate that the applicant has completed preliminary study on the height, scale, and mass of the potential replacement building. We recommend that the board's decision for demolition approval be granted only in conjunction with the conceptual approval of the height, scale, and mass presented by the applicant tonight. Considering that the applicant has already been delayed in the BAR process, a conceptual approval tied to the demolition approval will help the applicant to the next step of the approval process. If conceptual approval for the new construction cannot be granted at this time, we recommend denial of this application for demolition until the conceptual plan is further developed. We also request that no demolition permit be issued by the city until a new structure has been approved and permitted for construction. Thank you.
We'll go next to Erin Minigan.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on this request and would like to commend the level of documentation and research provided with the application. Despite the series of mid to late 20th century alterations, there's clear evidence of substantial historic material beneath the layers of finishes. While we are not opposed to selective demolition of the 1975 additions or renovation to include removal of layers of modern alterations, we are opposed to this request for wholesale demolition of what is clearly a pre-1902 structure. Thank you.
And third, we'll go to Phil Dufford. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Do I need to start over?
Yes.
My name is Phil Dufford, and I live at 143 Wentworth Street. I've lived there for the last 23 years. Am I still muted?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I understand that this new application, in this new application, there's a footprint and a building form for a proposed structure. However, There's no request for conceptual approval of this proposed height, scale, and mass, making this information irrelevant to tonight's meeting. Alex, there's a photograph that was submitted by Preservation Society, I believe, of the building in the 40s. Could you put that up?
Let me see if I can get that.
Okay, thank you, Kim. I'll proceed while you're looking for that.
I just want to let everyone know, normally we wouldn't be doing this, but somehow this was supposed to be in our presentation, but it was missed.
I continue to believe strongly in the importance of 139 Wentworth Street as it contributes to our streetscape. This building is historic, holding its place on Wentworth Street for nearly 100 years. This is the same building that is represented on the Sanborn maps provided to you in this application. This is also the same building as the one illustrated in this 1940s photograph presented to you tonight. The original second floor framing, I understand, is intact, and the organization of the second floor still remains. The ground floor footprint is still the old pharmacy. Though the building has evolved, it still maintains its original presence and its massing, making it an important part of a collection of historic buildings that exist quietly and harmoniously in this block of Wentworth Street. As it stands today, this is not a derelict structure that poses a physical threat to the neighborhood, nor is it an eyesore that should be dealt with through demolition. Beyond tonight's demolition request, there's not a plan for this site. If so, the application before you would include a conceptual request as well. What is being requested of the board is to allow a building that has historic value, is in good repair, and is actively serving as a neighborhood dwelling to be removed, resulting in a vacant lot with no defined future. There are many scenarios, but this could end up being a long-standing visual assault on our neighborhood and a safety issue for surrounding neighbors. Tonight, you, the board, should be provided compelling reasons that such demolition is warranted. There are none. In essence, you are deciding between an historic building integrally woven into the historic streetscape and nothing. For this reason, this application should be denied. Thank you.
Those are our three live public speakers, and then I think we have a few letters.
Okay. The first letter is from, excuse me, where is it? The Charleston Village Association BAR Committee, who writes to say that they've, on behalf of the association, the Charleston Village Association, they reviewed the second demolition request for 139 Wentworth. They continue to be opposed to the demolition and have the following comments that they wish to have entered into the record. Number one, as a matter of principle, they oppose demolition of buildings in Charleston Village that are over 50 years old. Each of these buildings, even as they evolve, are part of the narrative that tells the story of the neighborhood. Number two, in this case, they see a recently renovated building that seems, from the pictures supplied in the application, to be a very nice property, both inside and out, that fits well within the scale of the block and blends architecturally with its neighbors. Number three, despite the submittal of our proposed footprint and a facade massing, this submittal is only for demolition, not conceptual approval. There's nothing that holds the applicants to this envelope. And last, they are unaware of an official guideline that specifies a percentage of original fabric below which a historic building south of Line Street becomes eligible for demolition. The application has relied exclusively on the argument that little is left of the historic structure to justify the demolition. However, it has retained the window and door openings of the original house, carries on its original form and massing, as well as retaining original structural framing. 139 holds an historic place in the collection of buildings that define this block of Wentworth and Charleston Village at large. They request the application for demolition be denied. Signed, David Dumas, Yvonne Fortenberry, Jim Lundy, and Carter Hudgens. David and April Hoffman of 9 Pitt write about several concerns with the request for demolition of 139 Wentworth. The south side of the block of Wentworth, with the exception of the Rogers Wentworth Mansion, is a series of low-rise structures. The buildings have evolved through several periods of construction to be compatible in height, scale, and mass. The demolition proposal makes reference to a replacement structure of similar mass, but raised 4 feet to meet FEMA standards. This replacement will then not be of similar height and scale. Also feel the structure, though not grand, blends in with its adjoining neighbors. There's mention in the application of replacing the current structure with the building of the same footprint, but as mentioned previously, 4 foot higher. This is only a proposal, not a guarantee. Once demolition is done, any number of possible plans can emerge, and they ask the board to deny the demolition request. We did receive a letter from Mr. Dufford, but he read it during his presentation, so I'm going to go with the verbal comments. Those are our public comments. How about staff comments and recommendation? Kim, you're muted.
While we appreciate the massing study, the application before the BAR is requesting the demolition of the existing building. The BAR should not be ruling on any element other than the demolition of the existing building, including massing or footprint of the new building. Discussions or decisions on future buildings will be heard during a conceptual level review of new construction. We understand the viewpoints of the neighborhood and concerned citizens, but purview of BAR is to examine this building for its architectural merit, historic fabric, and structural integrity. The zoning department has confirmed that they cannot approve a redevelopment plan without approval for demolition. Due diligence and redevelopment pre-design meetings certainly can proceed. Ideally, due diligence, including neighborhood and advocacy groups, zoning and BAR pre-design consults precede, so that both submittals can go before the board together, but this is not required. So we have 3 comments. Number 1, the existing exterior materials and form date from 1975, when substantial modifications to the original building included a new brick front facade. 2, the report depicts the absence of interior historic fabric on the first floor and only limited fabric remains on the second floor. No historic fabric remains on the exterior of the building, which is the specific charge of the BAR to determine the merits of the building to the historic context of the neighborhood. And the last one is this heavily altered building has lost any architectural or historic significance that it once had. So with that, we are recommending approval for demolition with conditions noted. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Let's see here. Jeremy or Brittany, do you want to address public comments or staff comments?
Sure. I think the first thing is just to thank everybody that is involved in this. You know, we try to do our part to reach out to all the potential public, and we certainly understand their concerns. I think to the point about a concern about a vacant building or a vacant lot occupying the site for years, demolition won't happen without fully going through the final approval process and then pulling a permit on the replacement building. And unless Brittany has something else to add, that's all the response I have.
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Let's go to board discussion and deliberation. Does anybody feel like kicking us off on this one here?
Sure. I think staff is making a lot of sense. I do appreciate what the applicant's done in terms of sharing with us their intentions, and I take them at their word that these are their intentions, which they are publicly sharing for all of us to absorb and consider. But although I think years ago the board did condition demolitions on a conceptual approval of something new, I'm pretty sure that at some point the city's legal department clarified that that was not actually a viable option for us to do. We have to, like Kim said, we have to evaluate a building in a vacuum, so to speak, and decide whether or not it's worthy of preservation. And I would tend to agree with staff that this particular one is not, and I continue to be bothered by the way that it violently intersects with the the building to the west. And I'm hopeful that when a new building is designed and brought toward us for review, that they would take great care in addressing that intersection. And I know that I see a small hyphen they've proposed, but I feel like it should be a greater gesture to sort of free up that corner of the historic carriage house. And another thing I would just put on the table for them to study as they go forward is pushing the facade back to the south, just so that it's not sitting proud of the two elder neighbors. It seems a little disrespectful for it to be, you know, taking some sort of precedence over the older neighbors to either side. But in general, I mean, I think we're evaluating demolition, and I believe them. I know that it is true that they cannot get zoning resolution until they have an approval to demolish this building. So I think we need to wrestle with that question now, and I'm convinced that allowing demolition of this building is appropriate.
Glenn Gardner, I agree with the first 9/10 of what Julia has stated for the most part. But I guess I have a question for city staff, because I remain concerned about granting approval for demolition of a building without being able to control when and if something is put back there. And so when I read the sentence about that the charge of the BAR is to determine the merits of the building to the historic context of the neighborhood, that's where I begin to have a little bit of trouble, because I think the context of the building in relation to the two historic adjacent buildings is important. And where I think my struggle comes in is that this is not a trophy of a little building. But what it does to me is it does not significantly diminish the character of either historic adjacent building. And so that's where, without currently knowing what would be proposed, and I do similarly appreciate what was turned in as an elevation approach option to consider. My worry is that we as a board and the city has no control over the property owner maintaining their relationship with the current applicant. And so the current applicant, I think we trust and believe what their intention would be, but we have no way to guarantee that they would be involved beyond tonight based upon this current application. And so that's where I begin to have a little bit of difficulty. And I do look favorably upon the statement of the applicant in saying that they perhaps could voluntarily agree not to pull a demolition permit until they have an approval to move forward with a new building. That gives me a lot more comfort than just a blanket, yes, it's okay to demolish this building, and in 50 years there may still be a missing tooth in this streetscape. And so that sort of brings me full circle to that sentence about the merits of the building to the historic context of the neighborhood. And I think that is really my main concern here, is that at the moment we understand that we have a 2-story brick building with a relatively modern facade, and you know what you have. And my issue is taking that building away with no guarantee of when, how, and what would ever go back there.
This is Bill. I would say I agree, Glenn, with your assessment. Indeed, I believe the work done in the 70s has sort of rendered this a background building, but it does maintain the rhythm of the street and the building. So it is important to that historic context, to your point. And I guess the thing I would be interested to know is if there's, I understand the applicant needs an approval to go on forward with the zoning process. But I didn't know if there's any device potentially that staff might have as far as a, a conditional approval of some sort, or some sort of documentation, maybe with the building department, that we're going to need to see something, before the demo goes forward. I believe if they had approval of demolition, but with a condition such as that, hopefully that approval would let them go on with their zoning process. But again, leave some degree of a safety net as far as, wholesale removal of the building and then a vacant lot for some period of time.
Bill, as I understand the ordinance, there's nothing in the ordinance that says that we can put a time frame on them for what they can do, either a conceptual demolition or a requirement for them to come back to us before we grant full demolition approval. I think anything other than a firm yes or no is an overreach. There's no support of it in the ordinance.
So to that point from Kim, I mean, my issue is that, we obviously review a lot of buildings for demolition that have a structural defect or a reason that they need to be removed. My issue that I wrestle with here is I see zero merit for necessitating a demolition of this building unless the board is reviewing something that is better to go back there, more appropriate, and a better neighbor to the historic buildings on either side. Kim, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like they are allowed to make a submittal, well, two submittals. They are allowed to make a demolition submittal followed by a conceptual new building submittal concurrently. Is that correct?
No. No, because they have to have zoning approval to do this, and they're not allowed to get zoning approval until they have a demolition approval.
So if that's the case, they're in a catch-22 where they could never move forward.
Correct, unless we allow them to.
Yeah.
It's a cart and horse scenario. So I would have to say that the only reservation I have, and it gets back to your point, Glenn, was the potential duration of time.
Right.
I believe definitely that to staff's point regarding the merits of the building itself, there are bits and pieces of potentially of historic fabric in the building, but for all intents and purposes, it's been pretty much wholesale redone to the point of it, again, being sort of what I would consider to be a background building. So if I was just weighing it out on the merits of that, I would say that I believe staff's comments are appropriate. I would support the recommendation. I guess the only thing I was asking was sort of in conjunction with that further discussion we've been having, if there's any condition maybe the board could make an motion or anything like that would carry any weight to say, okay, go on with your approval through zoning, but we're going to need to see that replacement building before you can really begin the demolition work. Is there any condition of a motion or anything like that that carries any weight, any legal weight is what I'm asking.
I would just caution us to be careful there. I mean, we very frequently hear the demolition request, and then on the heels of that, the conceptual approval request. But we keep them apart, and we keep them apart, I think, for legitimate and probably legal reasons. I would just, I don't know if I mean, we could talk about it, but I don't know if I'd be comfortable sort of conditioning or handcuffing something like that. I tend to agree with Julia on this one. I remember when we first heard it thinking the same way. I appreciate sort of the steps that the applicant went through to give us a massing study to try to assuage any concerns about what might go back there. But at the end of the day, I trust staff and the facts they found. They don't see the architectural or historic merit, in the building, and nor did I. And so I'd be inclined to vote in favor of demolition. And if there's a concern that we're going to be staring at a vacant site for some period of time, to me, I can trust sort of why would anybody go demolish a perfectly good building and lose the rental income or the home or whatever until there's a bird in hand to come back with. I mean, I think the market takes care of that concern. So to me, I'd be inclined to vote in favor of demolition and not condition it unless we can come up with something that might surprise me.
And I mean, I'll just throw in there that this is an applicant with a tried and true history at the board. And in my estimation, there's some element of respect and trust that goes along with that. Yeah, and we really don't have any alternative that I can imagine. They can't proceed. We can force them to keep this mediocre minus building that is having people live below base flood elevation, or we can allow them the opportunity to proceed through zoning and design a replacement that will be better than what's there and more respectful of its neighbors. So to me, that second option is preferable. And again, I trust what they're saying. I trust that they've shown us these options in good faith. I trust that they have no intention of tearing it down and letting weeds grow for decades. It just wouldn't make sense. So I'll make a motion that staff has suggested for approval of demolition with the conditions noted.
Okay, Julie's made a motion. Is there a second?
This is Bill. I'll second.
Okay. There's no further discussion. I'll call the vote. Julia.
Yay in favor.
Bill.
Yay in favor.
Glenn.
Opposed.
Chair votes yay in favor, so the motion carries 3-1. Okay. Next agenda item is number 2, 35 Barry.
One more back in.
Yes.
35 Berry is requesting final approval for the new construction of an elevated house. It's new construction in the Charleston Village neighborhood and in the Old and Historic District. Here's an aerial image for some context on the west side of Berry between Wentworth and Montague. Just to reiterate again, this house currently on the lot in this image has been moved to the south. And so the vacant land above it is where the houses will be located. And this is that older house, again, that's moved more to the left or south. Just looking north. There was a previous meeting on August 27th of this year, and the motion was deferral with staff comment 3, the first part of it. Number 4, and board comment to restudy the east elevation of the front-facing dormer. There was another board meeting on September 24th. And the motion was conceptual approval with staff comments 1, 2, and 3, and board condition to clarify detail at eve return dormers and eliminate flood vents from the east elevation. And with that, the applicant can take it from here.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Ma'am.
Could you go to the next slide, please? Next, please. Go to the front elevation if you can. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again. We are here seeking final approval for the new house at 35 Berry. We have responded to the board comments and staff comments as follows. The board had asked us to go back to our original design of the infield porch massing, which we have done, and you can see here on the east elevation, and also remove the flood vents from this elevation, which we've done. Next slide, please. And then the other board comment was to refine the detailing of these dormers on the south and north sides to match the detailing on the front elevation, which we've done. We've also included a full set of drawings, including all of the details for construction, and so there's more detailing indicated later in the set with regards to these dormers. But that is basically all. We changed everything that was requested, and we would very much appreciate final approval today. I believe my clients are here too. I'm not sure if they wanted to speak, the Roskills.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for having us here. We're having a camera issue, but we just wanted to say we're just really pleased with the design, how we're finalizing it. So we're hopeful we'll get approval today.
Anybody have any questions right now?
You know, I have a quick and very random question, but what is the height of your knee wall at the attic floor?
Have to go and look. I can't see that far on this, but I can look it up on my computer. I think it's something like 4.5 feet, but let me just look real quick.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
If there are no other questions, Alex, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, how about staff comments?
Sure. If I can get there. The proposal is thoughtful and the changes made are sensitive to what the board has asked of the applicant. The applicant does have enough information to receive final approval for the submittal, so that's what we are recommending. Recommending final approval.
Julie, anything you want to clarify?
Hey, that sounds terrific.
Okay. Is there any board discussion? Is there a motion?
Glenn Gardner, or sorry, go ahead, Julia.
No, you go.
No, I think they've come a long way, and I'll make a motion for approval as recommended by staff with final approval. I guess I'm saying final approval by staff if there is anything to clarify for a permit, but I guess I'm reading this as that she does have what is necessary. So
is that a motion for final approval?
Yeah, I'll clean that up and just make a motion for final approval.
I'll second that.
Sorry.
All right, I'll put it to a vote. Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes yay in favor. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you. Next agenda item is 68 Wentworth.
68 Wentworth is requesting final approval for the installation of 2 neon signs. Building is not rated downtown circa 2001 in the old and historic district. Just some context photos for you to jog your memory about what's there. This is looking east on Wentworth Street and looking west. You can see where this SUV is approximately where these signs are proposed. And if the applicant wants to take it from here.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. This is David Thompson. I'm the architect for the project. We are proposing 2 signs. They are for 2 separate businesses within the Renaissance Hotel. They have the same operator. One is a breakfast lunch cafe called Handy and Hot. The other is a dinner, I believe dinner only for now, potentially brunch restaurant called Lenore. So they have separate entrances, separate names, separate identities, and therefore separate signs. We have been through zoning to receive approval, meeting all hardship requirements for an allowance for a larger sign than ordinance is written for. There's really 2, and do I have drawings that we can look at other than the application? Well, that's fine. Let's start with photographs. Thank you, Kim. There's really 2 primary drivers to the designs of these signs. The first being visibility. This section of Wentworth Street is a pretty lackluster block in terms of pedestrian activity between King and Meeting. It should be much more lively than it is, but there's not much in terms of businesses. The church is there. There's a gym, parking garage, but in terms of nighttime retail or food and beverage, it's pretty dark. So one challenge is offering visibility to a landlocked hotel between 2 pretty vibrant pedestrian thoroughfares, being King and Meeting. The other is dealing with visibility as constrained by the geometry of the building itself. So in the right-hand photograph that you see now, you can see where the existing sign for, or it's not there any longer, but the previous sign was located, and there's a jog in the building. You can see how to the right of that little tiny sign over the black SUV, the building juts out towards the street about 4.5, 5 feet. So as you are traveling directly down the sidewalk, these signs are set back from the edge of property line. Additionally, there's pretty significant tree coverage. Do we have another photograph after this? I think it was maybe demonstrated in the staff's photographs, but there's, no matter how big we make one of the signs, you're never going to see it through this tree that you see here between the myrtle and the palmetto. It's actually located directly to the right of the palmetto in that little setback just beyond the hedge. We've installed new pedestrian entrances at these locations that were not previously there, that had already been through staff approval and is constructed. So simply, visibility is what's driving size. The second factor is there is a stigma about the quality of hotel restaurants, especially in a town like Charleston. Nobody's real pumped to go to a hotel for their dining out experience. And there have been 3 to 4 failed restaurant attempts in this location prior to this current operator. So the hotel, under a new management contract, has put a lot of emphasis on reinvigorating the street through here, as well as the kind of connection back to Charleston, that these restaurants are not just for hotel guests. So they've gone out and brought in a pretty high level chef with an Emmy Award winning TV show and a James Beard Award winning book. And they'd like people to know where her restaurant is. So getting past that is sort of why we think these need a special sign. And for me, there's nothing better than neon. I am well aware that the BAR has historically, and will probably tonight, not fondly look upon neon. Been through it before. I've had 3 other neon signs approved downtown that city staff recommended denial of, being Stars, Butcher and Bee, Mercantile and MASH. I think it's completely appropriate, and I think it's the most appropriate because it actually still relies on a level of craftsmanship. It has imperfections and it has life to it. And I think there's nothing better than neon for this location. I would note that there are beautiful pictures of King Street decorated with neon signs hanging in the planning and zoning department. And that was an interesting sign we saw on 139 Wentworth Street, which appeared to be a very large, exuberant neon sign in the first applicant. So on to the signs themselves. They're coming up. So the Lenore sign, this situates you pretty well on the building facade. I think they are appropriately scaled to the building. Next. So sign number 1, the neon on this one is more subtle. There's sort of an edge band and then the letters and then the tobacco leaf motif. I think there's a shop drawing included after this. In terms of attachment, it's pretty straightforward and basic. There is interior access to the transformer, which we've already mounted in hopes of approval. So there's no exterior devices in terms of junction boxes and miscellaneous transformers for power. Next, please. And then the second sign at the other side of the building for handy and hot. Next. Next, please. Next, please. This is one where the dimensions for the sign as governed by zoning are a little misleading because of the shape of the sign. So we've taken the big fat rectangle of the sign, but as you can see, it's not a straightforward rectangle. Next, please. This one's a little more whimsical, which matches the identity of the restaurant. So we have these cool neon flames at the top. I've had it said to me before by the BAR that if we're going to approve a neon sign, it needs to be a good one and it needs to be special. I think this checks that box. So you've got a back painted metal cabinet, which has the lettering and the oven mitt and the green color. And then the neon itself is the yellow edge banding, yellow stroke for the handy and hot letters, and then the red outlining of the mitt as well as the flames. So we're very excited. The hotel is hopeful. The restaurant operator is in love with the signs and we would love your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions right now from the board?
I do. David, would you mind just clarifying for us what dimensions the zoning sign ordinance would have allowed versus what you got approved, just generally, so we have a handle on that?
So I believe the maximum square footage was 9 square feet per sign. Call it a 3x3 square.
Okay.
If we could flip backwards, my recollection is these are about 5 feet in width and somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 feet-ish in height.
Okay.
Let's see if I lied. Oh, 5 feet including the flames.
Okay.
This one's a little smaller, I think, 4 feet by 5 feet-ish.
Okay. All right, and then I'll ask, did you study alternatives such as backlighting or something different as a backup?
I mean, we have, and there are actually signs hanging now that we got staff approval. They didn't require any variances. They're just very plain, flat, unlit kind of placard signs, similar to what was there before.
Okay.
They're fine if you're in the daytime walking past them. Lighting, reverse channel lit letters for me are almost not worth the expense versus the signs they have now. I think it's so subtle that you really don't get any benefit of it from the concept of trying to catch attention from Meeting Street. We did a beautiful sign right across the street at the original Candlefish location. It was very subtle and elegant, and they have moved locations to the corner of King Street because nobody could find their store. So
okay,
yes, we've considered, but I think we have the right answer.
Thanks. And
Any
then
other? Go ahead.
last question, I'm sorry. The awnings that are indicated in the drawings, those were either staff approved or will be reviewed
They were,
separately, right?
they are installed.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
If no one else has a question, is there any public comment?
I have a quick question. David, how large is the existing sign that was shown in the photo on the, I guess that's on the west end, the hanging sign?
So that was a sign that was removed about a year ago. It was for a prior tenant, and it was a little bit, I think it was 36 by 30. It actually wasn't quite as big as zoning would have allowed. I don't believe it was a square. I think it was a rectangle.
Okay. And then is the entry to these new restaurants through the hotel lobby still, or do they have their own entry near where you are proposing the signage?
They now have their own entrances. So what we did prior to this was we modified, so there's entrance 1 and then entrance 2 mirrors it. Those were previously windows, and we have converted those to doors and added stairs. So there still is an entrance from the hotel lobby, and that's where the accessible route is, but they have proper pedestrian entrances now. The other thing we did was we shuffled the awnings. So previously there were awnings over the French doors in between those windows. We've removed those to provide the new awnings at the front door. There just didn't need to be so many. So that was part of our previous conversations and approvals from Dennis.
Thank you.
Okay, how about we go to public comment?
No public comment on this one.
Okay, how about Kim, how about staff comments?
Thank you. The signs are far too large at their current size to fit within the proportion and context of the street. The sign should relate to the pedestrians in the street and should be located either to the side of the door or on the immediately adjacent pilaster and several feet lower. Generally, neon is not permitted per signage policy statements. Neon is atypical for the city, except in historic cases or on a limited basis on King Street. So for these reasons, the staff is recommending denial.
Okay, thanks, Kim. David, you want to respond to staff comment?
The only one I would respond to is the location. We couldn't locate these on, I think, the pilaster in question without a pretty significant encroachment into public right-of-way. So these have already been vetted with traffic and transportation. So we would be talking about a significant projection over the sidewalk. I think if you were to look at, they're fairly squarely situated near the doors. And I think other than getting into a removal of those decorative grills that are existing and repeat throughout the facade, this is the right place for those signs. I don't disagree. I think we would be happy to study their height. Excuse me. The location was selected based on the rhythm of those existing decorative grills. There's sort of a datum that's already in place, as well as some through-wall mechanical. You can see pretty well depicted in this rendering right here. So that's how we arose at that location.
Okay, great, thanks. So we are now in board discussion. I actually have a question for the board that might help us get into this. Can anyone remind me how we came out on that, the one with the hamburger and the guitar? It was up on King, and I can't remember the intersecting street.
King and John, I was wondering about that. I think we ultimately approved something, but I don't think they ever built it because I guess COVID, I don't know. Right, Kim?
That's right.
That was the honky tonk burger.
Yes.
Correct.
But did we go with neon or like a backlit panel?
I think we let them have some neon.
My recollection is that we went with neon with a simplified or a tweaked color scheme and perhaps the guitar part of the motif.
Didn't it change the name, Alex? Do you remember?
I feel like it
Named
changed a couple of
Smash.
times. I don't remember. I'm gonna see if it was earlier this year, so it would have been January or February. I'll find it and let you know.
Well, I don't know. I think that's relevant because I'm just trying to remember if we've seen something like this before for precedent. I didn't mean to stifle the conversation. So if anybody wants to get us going, I just thought that was worth, I don't know, figuring out.
I'll jump in real quick. So I guess one thing looking at this picture right here with the streetscape and thinking about the heights of those signs, I don't know how fast these trees grow, but they're going to be right in the canopy of those trees unless there's some, aggressive pruning that allows a view corridor for these signs. I guess I can only imagine that the main reason for neon was as an attention grabber. And the thing that initially caught me in context of that was just what you guys discussed, the honky tonk burger, and the image of that kind of an establishment. I'm not saying that neon can't be tastefully done for more of a signature restaurant location like this. I do believe what the applicants presented. I personally, I think the first sign, I believe, could be executed in a good way. The second sign with its sort of free floating neon it's artfully done, very well done. To me, it's more indicative of maybe more of that other type of commercial neon. This appears to be a little more conducive to, I think, something potentially palatable for me. The other one, I guess, again, no slight on it. I like the design of both of them, but the other one seems to indicate more to me of a little bit different type of presence of neon, maybe more to, I believe, the staff's comment and staff's point of what neon really traditionally is. We know it is. So location, I think I have a little bit of reservation about, just concerned about the fact that there's probably going to be some aggressive, or wanting to be some aggressive pruning of those street trees. And the second part, I believe, would be, I think the sign should be probably lower as staff's comment to a more pedestrian experience. I think in lowering the sign sizes could be reduced as well. It almost becomes a proportional decrease as the sign goes down to relate more to that pedestrian scale. Probably still big enough to get the attention from the opposing main thoroughfare, King or Meeting, but smaller. So I agree with several of staff's comments, and so thanks.
I agree with a number of things that Bill said. I know that neon is a really sensitive subject with the board. It always has been. I personally feel like neon sign design hit a real nadir around like 1986, and it was terrible and just has horrible connotations. But I really feel like it's come back, and it is really wonderful, or it can be wonderful now, and can be subtle and effective and artisanal, as the applicant indicated. So especially with the Lenore sign, and with lowering it some and reducing the size by, I don't know, 15%, 20%, I don't know, something like that. I think that would be fine. I'm having maybe a little bit of trouble with the flaming oven mitt on the other side, but I don't know. I might be able to be convinced about that one as well. Maybe just removing the steam, although I know the steam is the cool part. I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Curious what other people think.
I am generally in agreement with what Bill said. I'm not sort of philosophically opposed to some tastefully and limited neon. I think that the Lenore sign comes closer to achieving that, but I do think it's too large. I agree with staff. I think that sign is just too large. I think they are both probably too large, and I struggle with the neon and the sort of character of the neon on the other sign.
I think I am completely aligned on the discussion about the Lenore sign. I think with it perhaps coming a little lower, the scale of it could and should come down a little. I also think the rendering may be a little misleading. I think it might make the sign feel larger, perhaps just being, you know, at the angle. That's what I was sort of looking at the actual photo of the old sign. But I think with a little lower height and a percentage reduction in overall size, I am comfortable with the Lenore sign. May we go to the handy and hot? Is it handy and hot or hot and handy? Sorry. Yeah, handy and hot. I guess a little bit of that is that the dimensions that we're looking at on the application are indeed a little misleading, just because of the, you know, you're having, David, to take the rectangular overall shape.
That's correct.
I think it just may be, I mean, and I know these are two different concepts. So the Lenore sign is certainly a little more refined. And the handy and hot clearly is a little more playful and casual. I'm guessing it is the faster pickup of the two locations. If I'm not, maybe the marketing people should.
No, you nailed it.
But I'm not going to say pick one or the other. I think I'm wanting them to not fight one another. That's my concern.
So is it fair to say we're starting to align around reducing by some percentage and lowering the Lenore sign, but we're still struggling with whether to sort of look for the handy and hot sign to be more in keeping? You know, are we willing to go that far is sort of the question. And I suppose we could take them one at a time. If we want to approve one or not approve the other, just thinking through procedurally how to handle both of these.
All right, if that is acceptable, then I will make a motion regarding the Lenore sign for approval with board conditions to lower the height and reduce the size by 15 to 20%.
And so may I ask, Julia, if so in the motion you've made, are we going to resolve that motion and then move on to a discussion on the other sign?
I guess so.
Gotcha. Okay. I will second that.
Yeah, let's just take them one at a time, just to move through it.
I will second the motion from Julia on the Lenore sign.
Julia, did I capture it on the Lenore sign? It's to, did you provide how much you want it lowered or just lower?
I think I would just say
Let's just say lower.
lower.
Okay, and talking sign area, you know, in terms of your percentage. Okay. So Julia's made a motion to lower the sign and reduce the sign area by 15 to 20%, seconded by Glenn. I'll call the vote on that. Glenn?
In favor?
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Nay, opposed.
Bill?
Quick question I should have asked earlier. Is this preliminary? What degree of approval is this?
Final, I guess.
I don't think there's degrees of sign approvals, Kim, right? It's just up or down.
Sign approval, yeah, and I didn't know if there was a caveat for, I didn't hear mention of a final review by staff because there is some element of reducing size and lowering that someone would want to put eyes on, I would assume.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Can I amend that motion and just tack on with final review by staff?
Yep, so there's now a third condition to the motion, which is final review by staff.
Do you mind repeating the whole thing again, please? And
yeah,
can we call
sure.
this 3A and 3B? So
Sure.
for the record.
Okay, so we're taking agenda item number 3 into 2 parts. 3A, as we'll call it, the Lenore sign, or 3A. Julie's made a motion for approval with the conditions that it be lowered, that the sign area be reduced by 15 to 20%, and with final review by staff. And Glenn, I think you were going to second that?
Correct.
All right. And so then we'll move on to 3B next, the hot and handy sign. So let's go back to a vote on 3A. So Julia.
Yay in favor.
Glenn.
Yay in favor.
Fillmore.
Nay, opposed.
Bill.
Yay in favor.
All right, so chair votes yay in favor. So 3A passes 4-1. All right, so let's take up 3B, or the handy and hot sign, and maybe just get into some discussion about where we left it.
Well, I will start off just by mentioning, now that we have given an approval with conditions to the other sign, I think that discussion of this sign moving forward, it definitely should continue to, or it should be in relation height-wise to the sign that we have just approved as we discuss moving forward. I think that should be on the table kind of as a starting point.
And to your point, Glenn, also size relating to height, as we discussed on the other, correct?
Yes. Does anyone have strong feelings about it having this distinctive form, or do you feel like, Glenn, did you say before you felt like it should be more in keeping with the other simple rectangular form, or just are there strong feelings on that front? I don't know that I have any.
I don't know that I really do. I mean, I think their marketing people have likely done what they're supposed to do, and that I'm reading one as a more refined, elegant restaurant, the other one as a, you know, as a more casual sign. And I think it's always good to let the signage tell you what is inside. So that's where I struggle with watering it down and or making it look like the other sign, because I think that the signs are their story that they're telling before someone were to walk into the door. I don't know that I think the handy and hot sign should reach any further out over the sidewalk than the Lenore sign. I think that's something I would be careful to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what if it were like a similar motion, but we clarified that last bit about the extension of it should not exceed the extension of the other sign? Would that work?
I mean, I guess a little of what we sort of thought about, if I recall back with the burger sign, not that that's the end all be all. I mean, that was never even built, but in my mind, I don't know, and I don't think this is a sign that a board is going to be wrestling with in 100 years. Because I think, whenever this current restaurant, runs its course in 2 years or 52 years, I don't know that that sign would remain relevant. So I think these signs are probably limited to the life of the business, kind of like the burger sign was sort of viewed as well. I mean, you wouldn't go put a bookstore in there and leave the burger sign, or at least I don't think you would.
Right, I'm just gonna go kind of out on a limb here and make a similar motion for final approval.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yeah, please.
Very quick moment. And it kind of goes to some initial discussion that we had about the deference of this sign to the other. I think one thing that the sign does, and again, they're both creative, they're both artistic, but the other, I like the use of neon on the first sign because it's more of a sort of a backdrop and lettering element to the field. And I believe this sign actually, well, number one, the neon's brighter on this sign, being yellow and red, about as bright as you can get. And then the free floating form of neon above the sign. This is more indicative of what I would consider to be just a flat out neon sign. Where the other, I believe, was a use of neon as you know, backlighting on a different type of sign. And the only reason I bring this up is I think we also need to understand that we might be seeing a ton of neon signs here in the future. And I believe the Lenore sign is a departure or a jump off to say, well, yes, that is a use of neon, but it's used in a way that's not really indicative of what you consider to be a classic neon sign, versus this sign, which I think is pretty much a flat out neon sign. So I'm just thinking of that from a precedent standpoint, if that makes any sense.
I hear you. Yeah, I think you have good points there.
I agree with Bill on that. I mean, I think this is a cool sign. I think it's very nice. I think it is the type of neon sign though that is not indicative to that part of town. And I will go back again to what I said originally, that these signs are too large. And the reason I voted against the first motion, because 15% is not, in my opinion, enough to reduce that sign. That still leaves it at virtually twice the size of the recommended ordinance size. And I think this sign, that sign is subtler, and so I'm a little less concerned about it. This sign is not as subtle, and it is quite large. I think it's not only too large based on the concepts of the sign ordinance, but I think it's too large for its location. I think it's too large for this location on the building. And so at a 15% reduction, I would not support this sign either.
Yeah, and I would say to that point, discussing size and relative up, and again, I know that the discussion was to have unique signatures for these restaurants, but getting my mind around also the size that you brought up, Fillmore, you know, I believe the sign there should be some degree of difference, but if, for example, the applicant proposed a similar type of sign as the other, with, you know, a different type of graphic on it of the same size, I would probably be very ready to support that. So I'm not trying to dictate what form this sign should take, but to your point about size, I believe that's a good point as well. They should relate to each other in that regard.
Can we review the length of these signs, the projection dimensions of these signs, and compare the two? I don't see any dimensions on that. There, is that it? 5'5", and the other one 5 feet.
So the handy and hot sign is 5 inches less than Lenore at the moment. Is that right, Kim?
And what was?
Yeah, that's what's submitted, yes.
There is a bracket also. So as far as total projection, we don't quite know that.
True.
My initial inclination, truthfully, would be that the handy and hot sign should be a little less prominent, or at least no more prominent than the Lenore sign, especially, I guess one of the questions I had written down earlier that I forgot to ask the applicant, near the handy and hot sign is the lettering for the hotel down at ground level. Is that hotel lettering illuminated? Like in front of that knee wall, I think is where there are individual letters by the driveway. I'm just curious what it's or they're on the They're on the knee wall. Are those illuminated, David?
I don't know. I've never been down that block at night before.
Okay.
I think they're reverse lit, but I don't know for sure.
But really, from that photo from the public realm or from the sidewalk, your proposed sign is really far left. I didn't realize how much further, toward the sidewalk it was. I mean, I'll just say, and I know this isn't really relevant, but I've been to I think at least two other restaurants that have been there before. And it was always a little odd because you sort of had to find your way into the hotel lobby, and then you realized that you were going out of the hotel lobby. And so I respect what they're, I think, attempting to do and, create their own identity independent of the hotel lobby. I just think we don't want to overwhelm the streetscape, but this is a relatively inactive, block in the evening. So I get that, but I think Handy and Hot should either be smaller than or definitely no larger than a revised Lenore sign.
Agreed.
Then it's just a question of whether to proceed down the path of what Bill was calling a true neon sign versus, this is the wrong way to say it, like a backlit neon sign.
And I would say probably to me, the elements that make a difference to that are the floating flames or steam and the vivid colors.
You want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give it a shot. So I guess because to the degree of potential alterations we're talking about, I'll just call it a denial of the sign as presented with staff's comments, and also board commentary that the sign should be of similar size, location, and general sort of subtlety of neon use as the previously approved Lenore sign.
Okay, so Bill, you're just thinking in terms of the motion, just denial that there's too much variability, potential variability on what would come next to be able to approve something with conditions.
Correct, but hopefully we have commentary that it's something that's definitely fixable. But
yeah, we've said our piece. Okay, yeah, we'll tell you what. Is there any further discussion on Bill's motion, or if not, is there a second?
So, Bill, may I clarify? Your motion, Bill, is saying that the neon is okay, but we're just looking for enough of a tweak that this is technically a denial. Is that, am I hearing you correctly?
yeah, so when I said subtlety of neon use, what I'm going back to my comment, so it could be the vividness of the colors that are selected, the amount that's used, and also no free floating form of neon, similar to the flames.
Okay, well, so Bill's made a motion. Does anybody else have any questions on it, or is there a second to it?
Mr. Chair, could you repeat the motion, please?
He just made a motion for denial. And the rest of this is just commentary. Did I get that right, Bill?
Yes, commentary for the applicant.
Okay.
Is your intent, Bill, that they would resubmit and come back to the board, or is staff going to review based upon that commentary.
I can ask Kim the comfort level of staff doing that. I'm perfectly fine with staff doing it unless staff would rather it come back to the board. I'm happy either way.
So if one is coming back to the board, then I'd prefer both to, or, you know, they can both be done at staff. Whatever you feel is best. We wanted to deny it, just keep that in mind.
Okay. I believe in our first review, we did not have a final review by staff, a stipulation in that first review. Am I correct?
No, that was in the motion. Yeah, so on the 3A, the Lenore sign, it was to lower it, reduce it, and final review by staff.
I would suggest that we split them and see the 3B again, if that's okay.
I agree, Julia.
Seems like there's a bunch of different paths it could take. So it's sort of a tough spot to put staff in when we have intentionally left it open, I think. So I agree to coming back, better approach.
So that motion would be still the way I worded it.
Right. Okay. So Bill's made a motion with a whole lot of commentary around it, but basically a motion for denial. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So tell you what, I'm going to put that to a vote and we'll see where we go. So Bill?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
I'm struggling a little bit, but I'm going to vote in favor of that just because I think there is enough directive given for it to move along.
Okay, Glenn votes in favor. Julia?
Similarly to Glenn, I will vote in favor of that.
All right, chair votes in favor. So the motion passes 5-0 on 3B.
Thank you, guys.
And if I might just add a blanket comment, maybe when those come back, if we can have, you know, dimensions of the arm, the bracket, all of that, just so that we can have a thorough understanding of what those total dimensions end up being.
100%. I've already fired that sign maker and we've got another one that's doing shop drawing. Not a problem.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. I'm clear.
All right, thanks. 89 Logan, agenda item number 4.
89 Logan is requesting conceptual approval for modifications to existing rear addition and new elevator addition. The building's a category 4 in Charleston Village, circa 1875, and in the old and historic district. Just for a little context, here's an aerial image of the property on Logan, just north of Queen Street and south of Magazine. And here are some images of the house. Looking south. Sorry, this is south. And this is north on Logan. And if the applicant wants to take it from here.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. I'm Barbara Linney, I'm the architect, and we are proposing some modifications. Kim, if you can proceed to the next page, please. The Sanborns. We are proposing a modification to the existing rear addition. You can see the 3 Sanborn maps. The lower map, which is the 1888, I believe it is. It actually says on that Sanborn that those buildings were unfinished. So I'm not quite sure if they were started in 75 and not finished for more than 10 years, but there's a reading across those buildings that were all built at the same time, that they were unfinished at that time. Regardless, there was an addition done at some point that appeared on the 1902 and is there again in 1944, which unfortunately was completely consumed by a later addition. Can we proceed to the next slide, please? So you can see the existing home has a rear addition, a rear one-story addition that projects out. It has a small porch that wraps around it and 2 masonry stairs. And we're proposing to modify that to have a usable porch space. And then we're also proposing not necessarily an elevator addition so much as the door to an elevator that will be installed within the existing building envelope, approximately where that powder room is in this plan. Next slide, please. So what we are proposing would have a little bit more functional, useful porch at the rear, but maintain the porch as viewed from the right-of-way. And again, just having a door into the elevator to allow the elevator to go to grade. And part of that is necessitated by the grand tree that you can see located at the rear, which a ramp, which would have to be almost 40 feet long, would have to work around, and that would be quite cumbersome. If we can proceed to the next slide, please. So there are some existing elements that we would be removing. There's a, actually, why don't we proceed to the photos, Kim? So as we look down the driveway from the street, there's a bay window that projects beyond the original plane of the house that we would like to remove. In addition, that eave that's projecting out beyond the original extent of the house. And then that porch that you see, those columns would be reworked with the reworking of the new plan. The next slide for photos, please. So this is the existing porch. There was extensive work done in 1990. The foundation that we would be cutting into for this stair, for this door, is of that vintage. It's a encapsulation of the foundation. It's not the original piers, and it's kind of proud of the piers and proud of the wall. These stairs on the side that we would propose to remove at the existing rear porch actually block access to a existing rear garage. So we're proposing to remove those as well. And next slide, please. So we have the rear elevation. You can see our grand tree that we're trying to work around, and then that's the garage at the very rear that we're trying to get access to as part of that reworking. So if we can go back to the elevations, Kim. So what we are proposing is to rework that one-story elevation. We would remove that existing bay window and finish the original corner of the house down to the existing foundation, and then keep the low slope flat roof, as we call it, and the existing mechanical as a hyphen area, and then create a new fairly low gabled roof, but with the porch to the side, again, to maintain the porch along that rear as you look down from the driveway. You can see we're also proposing to add some windows into the existing enclosed spaces, and in addition to that door. Next slide, please. So this is the elevation from the north side. The existing double window is a stained glass window that we're proposing to relocate. And then the existing rear elevation again to redevelop that. That tree is actually not easy to see from inside the house, and we'd certainly like to have better views of it from inside the house. So opening up that back elevation a little bit while we rework into the to the gable with a lower slope porch roof. And I believe that's all I have, Kim.
Any questions for Barbara? Thank you, Barbara.
Barbara, could you clarify the, I'm not certain which window is a stained glass window.
On the north elevation, the next slide.
Previous slide.
Oh, I'm sorry, the previous slide. Those double window, oh, can you see the double windows on the north elevation?
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I have two tiny questions.
Okay.
One, I'm just so curious, do people ever fall out of that door in the master bathroom that's just...
No, and it's proven quite useful for access to the mechanical and for cleaning that roof off. That it accumulates quite a bit of leaves in the spring when that oak tree drops its leaves.
Okay.
But it has a bolt on it that remains locked.
Gotcha. Okay, and then
we are proposing to change it to a full light door, Julia, to get some more light into that bathroom.
Gotcha. My other tiny question is, Kim, if you could look at the south elevation for a second. I'm not understanding why you're extending a landing in the same plane as the porch floor. Why wouldn't you just come?
Because that would be a screen porch, and so I would need to have a landing outside of the screen doors.
You really don't for screen doors, but just throwing that out there. Screen doors are not subject to that same rule.
Okay.
If there are no other board questions, do we have any public comment?
We have 2 members of the public speaking. Let's go to Aaron Minigan first.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society feels this is an appropriate approach to reworking this rear addition. We do feel the porch would be most successful unscreened. However, if the screened option is pursued, the porch footprint should be inset slightly from the plane on the south side of the main house to minimize visibility. Thank you.
And next we'll go to April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for the approval for modification to the existing rear addition and construction of the new elevator addition. We have no objections to the application, but we believe that it is important for the roof overhang of the rear addition not to protrude beyond the plane of the wall. With this exception, we recommend conceptual approval of the application.
I think that's it, Alex. How about staff comments?
Thank you. Modifying the fenestration along the south elevation of the house is positive, but the proposed fenestration isn't balanced or appropriately sized and should be restudied. Normally, we would discourage the proposal of a door at grade and in this location of a formerly enclosed piazza. However, since this is an elevator and the mechanical system seems to be very compact, it seems like a logical location. The alterations to the rearmost volume are positive, raising the roof pitch, installing balanced fenestration and appropriate porch details. The rear or west elevation is clearly visible from Franklin Street. Simplify the fenestration for a more traditional or more elegant window system. So with those comments, we recommend conceptual approval and final review by staff. Thank you.
Okay. Barbara, do you want to clarify or respond to anything?
No.
Okay, board discussion. Who feels like leading us off?
This is Bill. I'll go ahead. I would say that I agree with the staff's comments and recommendation. I guess the only other thing that I would add was I do think that the porch columns do need to be slightly pulled back from the corner, that rear porch. I don't know if the roof line, because that would be a pretty big decrease in the usability of that porch, but definitely the column should be pulled back behind that wall corner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aligned with Bill's comments and staff's comments, and don't really have anything else to add.
I'm in line with Glenn and Bill on that. I don't have anything. I don't think I have anything to add.
I am also, and I'm just trying to process the preservation group's concerns. I think it would be reasonable to pull that eave overhang in so that it's not projecting as much beyond the plane of the historic house. And since the preservation groups were concerned about the visibility of the porch element, I think it would be good to remove that landing outside the footprint of the porch, even if it requires shifting to a single screen door and making sure that it swings in. All right, so I'll try to make a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments and board comments to inset the porch framing line from the corners of the building footprint, to decrease the eave overhang at the new roof line, and to eliminate the exterior landing at the rear porch.
And final review by staff?
And final review by staff.
Make sure I got that, Julia. So Julie's made a motion for conceptual approval, staff comments noted, and board conditions to, see, read my writing here. Decrease the eaves overhang at the roof line, to inset the porch framing line from the corners, and to remove the landing. Final review by staff?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to Julie's motion?
Second.
Second by Glenn. All right, I'll call the vote. Julia?
Yay in favor?
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay and, oh, sorry.
Phil, okay.
Switch the order.
Sorry, I mixed up here. Bill?
Sorry, Bill.
Bill, did you say yay in favor?
Yay in favor. Thank
All
you.
right. Fillmore, now's your moment to shine.
Yay in favor.
All right. Chair votes yay in favor, so the motion passes unanimously. The next agenda item, I think that got deferred, right? So we're on
Yes,
to,
it did.
We're on to agenda item number 9, to Michelle Place. And I think, Julie, are you recusing here out?
Correct, yes.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving.
Two Michelle Place is requesting conceptual approval for the elevation of residence to meet FEMA requirements. The building's not rated in the Charleston Village circa 1880 and in the Old and Historic District. There's an aerial image to give you a little bit of context. It's down Michelle Place, which is a little alley on the south side of Queen Street, north of Broad. And some context photos. This is looking at Michelle Place, which is not a public right-of-way. So this is the closest public right-of-way, is, Queen Street. And with that, if the applicant wants to take it from here.
Hold on, I promoted the wrong Aaron. Hold on. All right.
Good evening, board members. This is Erin Lanier with Julia Martin Architects here tonight on behalf of the owner of number 2 and number 4 Michelle Place. And we are requesting conceptual approval to elevate these 2 historic residences. If you're not familiar with this area, as Kim mentioned, and I'll admit I've walked by here numerous times, never noticed it. Michelle Place is a private ingress-egress easement that runs south from Queen Street between Chapman and Franklin. There are 4 historic homes at the end of the easement, and they have all been subject to continued flooding for many years. Our client, who lives at number 4 and is in the process of renovating number 2, has been working closely with the city to secure a FEMA grant, and the next step is to get your approval of the elevated designs. I'll start here with number 2. Like Kim said, this photo on the left would be the view you'd have from the public right-of-way at Queen Street. And you actually can't even really see the house in this photo because it's behind the Italian cypress at the end there. Next slide, please. This is a slightly more zoomed out context, and as we've noted here, the house in question, which is shown in blue, is 190 feet away from the right-of-way on Queen Street and minimally visible, as shown in photos 2 and 3 from Chapman Street, when looking between the houses you approved for elevation there 2 meetings ago. Next slide. Here are some existing photos of the house. The top photo shows the north elevation, which faces Queen Street, but is mostly tucked behind number 1 Michelle Place. The bottom right-hand photos show the west elevation, parts of which can be seen from Chapman, and then the east and south elevations are really not visible from anywhere. And I'll just mention that we are going to be replacing the piazza screen with railing to match the existing railing elsewhere, but we are confident this is not historic or even old material. Next slide, please. This is our existing and proposed site plan. Chapman Street would be beyond the houses to the left. Queen Street is at the top, but again, almost 200 feet away. And you'll see that at both of these properties, we're proposing to park under the house. Given the limited visibility from the public right-of-way, we feel like this is a reasonable request that can be achieved without having to raise the house any more than is already required. In this case, we'll provide a parking spot where none currently exists. We've studied several iterations of stairs at this residence, including trying to maintain the piazza screen entry, as you'll see at number 4, and locating a stair inside the piazza, but ultimately decided a single masonry stair on the south side of the house to serve as the main entry point was the best option. Apologies, can you hear me again?
Yes.
So as I was saying, this is a bit of a puzzle at first because the layout and clearances on these modest lots and smaller piazzas are a little bit more complex than they might first appear, but you're actually approaching the house from the backside. And so we think this solution is practical for everyday living while still being sensitive to the unique conditions and historic nature of this little enclave. And there are actually multiple historic precedents such as 19 Gadsden and 113 Ashley that are successful examples of this approach. And we felt this configuration made the most sense because it allows us to retain as much of the limited piazza space as possible while also providing a direct connection to the garden. And as you'll see in elevation, we envision a nice fence and pedestrian gate that would align with the end of the piazza and direct guests to the stair. Next slide, please. This is our proposed foundation plan as well as some precedent images for the garage doors. We're calling for a double wide block wall at the east elevation so that the doors can be nicely recessed and be even less detectable from Queen Street. From the garage, the owner could then access the kitchen at the first floor via an interior stair or exit to the garden through 3/4 light louvered doors under the piazza. Next slide, please. Here's our existing and proposed first floor plan. At the north elevation, we've eliminated an existing kitchen door where there won't be enough room to have an exterior stair, so that will become a window. And then at the piazza, the non-historic piazza screen will be replaced with a railing to match the existing. And the new masonry stair will lead you to the last gate of the piazza and through the French doors into the house. Next slide.
Sorry, I jumped ahead. This is the second floor.
That's okay. There's actually no changes at the second floor, so if you want to move to the elevations. This is our existing and proposed east elevation. And again, the garage door will be recessed about 16 inches into the wall, so it's really not something you'll be able to perceive at an angle from Queen Street. We're proposing a traditional smooth stucco foundation, a new water table, and the addition of operable wood shutters to all the windows, and that the garden is the pedestrian gate and fence that would then lead you to the new stairs. Next slide. The south elevation, the existing railings will be replicated at the first floor. The new stair will have a stucco base with brick treads and iron railing. And then it's difficult to see, I realize, in this image, but the piazza will be open at the ground level, and we're proposing French doors back at the main wall that would align with the doors above. Next slide. The west elevation is the true back of the house, so we'll be locating most of our foundation vents there, and then otherwise just add shutters to the existing windows. Next slide. And then lastly, here at the north, we'll replace the kitchen door with a window, replace the sashes at that large stair window to better relate to others on the house, add new shutters throughout, and introduce a window at the foundation to allow some light into that space. That is all I have, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Aaron. Anybody have a question?
Aaron, can you clarify for me, as I didn't pay attention to this on the ground floor plan, how do those garage doors function and open?
You know, we haven't gotten that far into it. I imagine that they will probably be roll up, but don't quote me on that. We haven't studied it in detail.
Okay. If there are no other questions, is there public comment?
See, no public comment on this one.
How about staff comments?
Well, okay, on my way to it. We have one comment. The elevation is simple and respectful of the street and fabric, and we are recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff. Although I'm not sure that we actually need any more information. So, Alex, do you think we have enough information? Just, I don't see what else we could need because the rest of the building's already there.
Do we have is there a section through the new foundation? I feel like that would maybe be the only thing.
Then yes, final review by staff.
Okay. Aaron, is there any questions?
No.
All right, board discussion. Is there any discussion?
My only discussion is I think there's just a few little details to coordinate, like the garage doors and, you know, the section as needed, things like that. I think that it's a very sensitive, positive raising or elevation of the building that keeps the structure, to me, in scale with its surroundings. And I mean, having personally been in that area after one of those floods, I would have zero opposition to the proposal to raise a home in this location.
I agree with Glenn, and particularly with those. Normally, of course, you know, I would not like to see a garage doors facing the street. This is, you know, not a public right of way, and with those garage doors tucked back in the way Aaron suggested, they are. I've been down there and tried to see that elevation from Queen Street, and it's you really just virtually cannot see that elevation of the building from Queen Street.
Yeah, that's a good point, how far back it is. Even though there's a street sign, I could have sworn I was on a public street when I walked down there, but turns out I was trespassing. So is there any other discussion, or are we ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with final details as discussed to staff.
Okay, Glenn's made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, if there's no other discussion, I'll call a vote. Glenn,
Yay in favor?
Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
chair votes yay in favor, so it passes unanimously. Now we're on to 4 Michelle Place.
4 Michelle Place is requesting conceptual approval to elevate a residence to meet FEMA requirements. Again, it's not rated in the Charleston Village circa 1880 and in the old historic district. I think we know what we're talking about. This one is the blue one. If you're looking down Michelle Place, it's a little bit more visible. And if Erin wants to take it from here.
Thanks, Kim. So this is our client's personal home, and as she said, this is the sort of teal building that you see there. You want to go ahead and skip to the next slide. This is our expanded context, the building shown in blue there, and it's approximately 130 feet from the right-of-way at Queen. And while you do see a little bit more of the north elevation than we do at number 2, the other 3 elevations are really minimally, if at all, visible from anywhere, particularly as it relates to areas that we are modifying. In the second photo, you're looking from Franklin, and that's Eddie Bellows' addition that was recently approved in the foreground under construction. Our house is beyond that. And then you can just barely make out the peak of the gable from Trapman in the third photo. Next slide. Here are some existing conditions photos. And again, approaching this house, you're really walking up to the back. There's an existing entry at the kitchen where you see the portico there. We'll be relocating that further to the left as part of this project. At the piazza, there are remnants of a former piazza screen, and we'll actually be reconstructing that as well. Next slide, please. Here's our existing and proposed site plan. And one of the key differences between this property and number 2 is that here there's about 25 feet beyond the north side of the house before you get to the property line, which currently includes a significant chunk of asphalt and 2 parking spaces. Our client would very much like to convert this area to garden space rather than looking out over a parking lot. And so again, we're requesting to locate 1 parking spot under the house. Additionally, we'll have 2 sets of masonry stairs, one from the shifted kitchen door down to this new garden space on the north side, and then a double masonry stair from the piazza that will serve as the main entry and provide access to the garden that's located on the south side of the house as well. This couldn't be achieved at number 2 in part because we simply did not have the same amount of space in front of the house as we do here. Next slide, please. This is our foundation plan, again indicating the double wide wall and recessed garage door, which we feel is minimally perceivable. Parking under the house will also reduce the amount of impervious paving in this already flood-prone area and the visual impact of the sea of parking from Queen Street. So from the garage, you could exit to the north and take the stairs to the kitchen entry, or exit via French doors on the south side out to the ground floor of the piazza and the garden beyond. Next, please. You get a sense of the stairs in more detail here at our existing proposed first floor plan. The kitchen door will move to the east and have a new masonry stair to grade. Then at the piazza, we have that double masonry stair leading to the reworked piazza screen with 1 step recessed inside. Next slide. Again, sorry, no changes at the second floor. And then moving to the elevations. Here's our existing and proposed east elevation, where we've centered the new garage opening on the windows above. We have a traditional smooth stucco foundation, a new water table, and we've added a window here at the foundation level. Both stairs will be the same smooth stucco as the foundation with brick treads and iron handrails. And then we have the reconstructed piazza screen with a new door, transom, and copper canopy above. Next slide. This elevation won't be visible from anywhere, but again, we're keeping the piazza open at the ground floor level with French doors to align with the doors above and restoring the railings at both floors to match the existing. Next slide. This elevation is also not visible. Here we're simply replacing the sashes at the large stair hall window and providing operable doors between piers below that bump out to allow access for maintenance on that side of the house where they're really close to the property line. Next slide. I'll end here with the north elevation where we're shifting the kitchen door to the east to align with the window above and adding a new canopy and then installing a new window back in the previous opening. The stair here will have a simple masonry landing with a louvered door below, brick treads and iron rails. And then at the base of the stair is a wood door to access the garage. And then you can see the main entry stair there beyond that leads to the piazza. I'll also just reiterate that the plan here is to have a nice fence and heavy vegetation around the garden that will be in the foreground for privacy and separation from the parking lot. but also to reduce confusion about this being the main entry. We looked at the idea of a simpler wood stair to further that distinction, but the reality of constant exposure to water really makes masonry a better choice of material for long-term maintenance. That is all I have, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Aaron, this is Bill. I have one question. Can you tell us your inspiration for the design of the piazza screen door and canopy? Is that something else around the area there that you borrowed from?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it's just sort of in keeping with traditional piazza screens that aren't too over the top or anything like that, but just trying to help mitigate some of the height that occurs there by having a door with a canopy and the transom above.
Thank you.
If no one has a question, another question, is there public comment?
We have a letter, and that actually applied to Michelle as well, so it can be read basically on behalf of both. I should have had it read before, I didn't realize.
Yep, hang on, let me find it. All right, so for both to and for Michelle, we received a letter from Robert Vanderweege of One Michelle, who writes that he'd like to provide comments for tonight's meeting. Michelle Place has endured 3 major flooding events. Each has caused extreme disruption to our lives. There is one clear solution, that is to elevate our home to a height where this is never again a burden on us or our insurance companies. The proposals for 2 and 4 Michelle are carried out in a way that will enhance the character of the alley and restore livability to the owner, and he fully supports these proposals. Okay, how about staff comments?
Again, just reiterating, the proposal for the project is respectful of the historic fabric and we recommend approval. Actually, think this helps with the proportion of the existing house. So staff's recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff. Thank you.
Okay, Aaron, any questions?
No, thank you.
Is there any board discussion?
Well, I agree with staff's comments and recommendation. And very happy to see also that decrease in impervious area and more green space. So I can go ahead and make a motion for conceptual approval with final review by staff, if everybody else is okay with that.
Second that motion.
All right, so I'll call, Bill's made a motion, Glenn has seconded it. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes yay in favor, motion carries unanimously. Next agenda item is 28 Bennett Street.
"28 Bennett Street is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a single-family dwelling with an additional height based on architectural merit. It's new construction in the Charleston Village and in the Old and Historic District. Here's an aerial image just to orient you. This is the corner of Bennett at Gadsden Street. It's the northwest corner, 2 blocks south of Calhoun. The building here got approval for demolition, so that building, the brick building, no longer exists. And this is looking east on Bennett Street and west toward the intersection on Bennett and Gadsden. And Aaron wants to take it from here.
I think if Jeffrey is on the call, he was going to start. Is he available?
Yes. Thank you, Aaron. Kim, I appreciate it. And board members, thank you for allowing us to present these 2 particular projects in this very unique location that Julia and myself are familiar with, having developed some pictures that weren't in the initial slideshow, but Charleston Row right next door to the 6 row homes on the south side of Gadsden. So we think this is a completely unique location that's very site specific. And I'd like to commend Julia and Aaron for working so closely and coming up with what we believe is an extraordinary product that, as Aaron will explain, reknits the residential rhythm of Bennett Street and contextually fits in perfectly at this corner. Thank you so much. And I'll toss it to the very capable Aaron Lanier.
Thank you. Jay, if possible, I might ask for a few extra minutes on this one, but I'll be very concise on number 24, if that's okay.
That sounds fine.
So I'm starting with number 28 because it's the more visible, the two being in the corner, and therefore plays a more prominent role in weaving together the context of this area, as Jeffrey mentioned. This corner at Bennett and Gadsden Street has long been occupied by this one-story office building and parking lot, which was recently granted approval for demolition. At that point, the property could have supported 4 residential units by right facing Gadsden Street, but the owner decided to pursue and received approval of a special exception to convert these into 2 single-family residential lots, which will instead face and continue the residential rhythm of the streetscape on Bennett. The diagram you see there on the bottom half of your screen illustrates the parameters of what BZAZ approved, essentially two floors over a raised basement, which is dictated by the flood zone and to be used for parking, with the option to request an additional half-story based on merit and context from the BAR. So please note that because of the flood requirements, we are effectively conceding an entire floor of living space that the ordinance would otherwise allow, and in turn, we're requesting permission for a modest enclosure at the roof level. Given the confines of the new height ordinance, we determined that the avenue open to us to achieve what this corner we feel really needs was to request approval of this enclosure from you based on context and architectural merit, and we've crafted our design with that intention in mind. So if you'll go to the next slide. This is an overview of our context, which, as you can see, is really a varied collection of styles and ages and uses and even housing types. Directly to the east is a historic residence with 2.5 stories of living space that was elevated in 2006 and now has parking underneath. To the south are 6 townhomes completed by the same architecture and development team in 2016, also at the garage at the ground level and accessible roof terraces. And then on the opposite side of Gadsden to the west is a mid-century medical office on one corner, a 1960s ranch on the other corner. And to our north is a detached garage, which belongs to the historic residence at the corner of Gadsden and Halsey. So we definitely have a hodgepodge of structures, but our goal here was to try to knit these together with a design that serves as a transition and fills in the missing teeth at this corner. Next slide, please. So in looking at the history of this site, which was formerly part of the Halsey Lumber Company and Mill Pond Complex, it actually does not appear that there were homes on these lots prior to the former office building, and therefore nothing to explicitly guide our notion of what these new houses should be. But we did study and reference both modern and historic precedents in the area, and this paradigm of 2.5 stories over a raised basement is present directly to our east and south, as well as about a block to the west at Halsey Park. In particular, these examples all tend to have their entries at the street facade and a more direct connection to the sidewalk than you may see elsewhere, with the most prominent historic example being the Bull Street row houses just a few blocks away. While we're on this page, I'll also highlight some of the elements of the Charleston row townhomes that we feel have been really successful and that you'll see implemented in our new designs as well. Because of the significant flooding in this area, the city has long-term plans to elevate the right-of-way here. And so in preparation, these buildings were constructed on retained grade with a nice stucco coping wall and heavy plantings that provide lush vegetation at the sidewalk, as well as help store and reduce the run-up on the site. These buildings also have a small enclosure at the roof level that you see in the photos here, which provides access to the green roof, a nice amenity for the owners, but also helpful in terms of dealing with water. We feel like these components are functioning and aging well and will similarly contribute to a successful design across the street. Next slide, please. This is a survey of the 2 new lots showing the former office building and the sort of CO parking. And I'll just mention that the Halsey Lumber Company actually recorded a plat with these lots originally configured as we're showing them now. So while houses were never constructed here, we do see this as a return to what was always intended for this street. Next slide, please. This is our proposed site plan for 28 Bennett. The zoning ordinance sets a max lot occupancy of 50% for the zone district. Our houses will cover just 38% of the lot, which means that our site will actually go from 90% impervious prior to development to just 45% after construction. We're also engaged in working with Forsberg, who is handling the civil engineering and drainage for the site. And we're confident in our approach here, which is to have our grade elevated and retained approximately 3 feet above the sidewalk level. And then we'll actually lower the slab at our garage about 12 inches below grade to better utilize the space under the house. Pedestrian access will be via a double masonry stair that floats up to a recessed front porch and main entry at Bennett Street. And then we'll have driveway access from Gadsden to the garage entry at the back of the house. We're proposing traditional cobblestone or similarly pervious paver at grade. From the garage, there's internal circulation at our hyphen where we have stairs to the side yard level and the first floor, as well as an elevator. Next slide, please. This is just a preliminary grading and drainage plan that further illustrates how we intend to retain and drain and move water on the site utilizing a system of French drains that tie directly into the existing stormwater system. Next slide. This is a selection of materials and additional design precedents that speak to the aesthetic and material quality we're looking to achieve with this project. We want these houses to provide a bridge between the historic neighbors to the east and the modern row houses to the south, and high quality materials that allude to traditional craftsmanship and the architectural elements of Charleston, but used in a quietly contemporary manner, are part of what we think gives these designs merit. So we're proposing boral Dutch lap siding at the exterior with nickel gap used inside the porches and at the hyphen. The foundation will be a traditional 3-coat smooth stucco on a masonry base with Old Carolina brick at the chimney and masonry stairs, and then painted sapele louvered screening along with copper gutters, flashing, coping at the roof. Next slide. Moving to our plans, we have a raised foundation, which with our first floor at 10.5 feet above current grade, makes parking underneath a given. You can see there we're breaking up the mass with a hyphen that acts as a breezeway at the ground floor and contains the internal circulation above. The owners could take that stair up to the first floor, or guests could enter via the front porch, leading you to the open kitchen, living, dining room space. That space is anchored by a masonry fireplace, which projects to the exterior and we feel provides a strong focal point for the west elevation. Next slide. Our second floor contains the master bedroom and bathroom in the front volume, which is also able to take advantage of the recessed second floor porch. Then we have 2 additional bedrooms in the rear volume, and adjacent to the hyphen is a gallery space with a spiral stair to access the roof. While we are in a 3-story height district, the flood zone requirements, of course, force our ground floor to be unconditioned and therefore only useful for parking. So we're asking for this small enclosure to allow for use of a rooftop garden. The size of the enclosure is less than 25% of the building footprint. We've pulled it away from the edge at the street frontage to minimize visibility and limited the plate height to 7.4. Additionally, you'll see in our elevations that we're keeping it very minimal and glassy, and the roof parapet height is designed such that visible railings are not needed. Next slide, please. So here's our south elevation, which faces Bennett Street, and our rear elevation, which faces the neighbor's garage to the north. At the front, we have the 3-foot tall masonry coping wall retaining the grade behind it. Our front steps are actually built into the earth up to the first landing and then turn back toward one another to connect to the recessed first floor porch and the main entry to the home. These stairs will be masonry with brick treads and have custom iron handrails. At the recessed porches, we'll use custom painted wood railings and columns, and the wall finish in that recessed area will be a boral nickel cap. I'll also mention that in our discussions with staff and the Preservation Society, they brought up the suggestion of slightly widening that front opening at the recessed porches, and we're totally willing to study and look into that. The main siding on the building will be the boral Dutch cove, and then the foundation will be masonry with a traditional smooth stucco finish, and then the true masonry chimney will be clad in Old Carolina brick. We're using copper for the roof of our rooftop enclosure, as well as all flashing gutters, downspouts, and then traditional profile clad STL windows throughout. In keeping the sort of quiet simplicity of the massing and fenestration of this house, we wanted the garage doors and the shutters to be pretty understated. We like the idea of these single shutters at each window, which are composed of narrow battens with minimal hardware. Next slide, please. This is the west and the most prominent elevation that you'll see. We think it has a really nice rhythm with the 2 volumes that are broken down by the large windows of the hyphen and the prominent chimney. And the materials, they're traditional, provide a nice contrast of textures between the brick and the siding, the battens of the shutters, as well as the smooth stucco and louvered vents at the foundation. The recessed porch is a slightly more contemporary element, but again, we feel like it works here in such a transitional context. And then you can see our rooftop enclosure, which will be set back about 6.5 feet from the west wall of the house and 14.5 feet from the Bennett Street facade. Next slide, please. At our east elevation, we've reduced the fenestration in keeping with Northside manners, and we're also proposing the painted sapele louvers at the porches for added privacy. Next slide. These are our streetscapes in Gadsden and Bennett. Despite having to go up 2 feet for the city's freeboard requirement, we feel like these houses fit in well with their neighbors and will hold this corner in a respectful and dignified manner. Next slide. So I'll end with our 3 renderings, which really convey the quality and detail that's going into this design. You'll see the houses are sisters, but we're open to exploring ways to provide subtle differentiation, whether that be through colors or siding profiles or detailing with the ironwork and porch railings. And I'll also just point out how minimally visible the rooftop enclosure is from the street. We certainly feel that these houses uphold the character and quality of Charleston's historic district and are deserving of that small additional request for height at the enclosure. In our opinion, the development of these 2 lots reflects exemplary urban design and contributes to the public realm through the conscious effort, not simply to maximize the density permitted here, but rather to pursue special approval to de-intensify and reorient the lots, reestablishing the historic streetscape pattern. Furthermore, we've put in tremendous effort to mitigate flooding and reduce runoff at this sensitive intersection in a way that actually enhances the pedestrian experience and is considerate of the long-term goals of the city. And we've architecturally provided a detailed analysis of how our design meets the tests for merit. I believe that was included in our submittal requirements. I won't read it to you, but in summary, we have incorporated all of the applicable principles for new construction adopted by the board in 2017. These include, but are not limited to, giving special attention to high quality tactile and visual experience articulated via the 2-tier masonry base of the sidewalk and at the building itself, which incorporates the highest quality materials, including smooth stucco over masonry, old Carolina brick, traditional iron handrails, and louvered sapele screening. These buildings, we feel, work in harmony with their surroundings by echoing the spirit and the verticality of the existing historic structures on Bennett, yet serving as an aesthetic bridge between the mix of styles and the immediate vicinity. And lastly, we thoughtfully incorporated details and elements which we feel reflect traditional craftsmanship, proportions, and textures, as well as small-scale visual interest that makes Charleston architecture so unique and timeless. So we hope you'll agree that this design is worthy and appropriate solution to this really unique urban corner. Kim, if you'll flip through, there's 2 more views here I'll share with you. This is looking southeast from Gadsden. And then the next slide is looking west on Bennett. That is all I have for this one, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Board questions? If there's no board questions, is there any public comment?
We have 2 members of the public speaking on this one. We'll go to April Wood first.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has met with the applicant and has reviewed the applications for conceptual approval of new construction of a single-family dwelling with additional height based on architectural merit and context at 24 and 28 Bennett Street. This area of Charleston Village has a varied context. Non-historic and non-contextual buildings of varying sizes are found across the street in both directions. We are pleased that this applicant has chosen to conform to the original site plan for the parcels at 24 and 28 Bennett Street, as this will help these new structures better fit into the neighborhood context. The proposed structures are similar in scale to 22 Bennett Street next door and provide a good transition between the non-historic structures and the historic structures to the north and east. The rooftop access is set back from the street, and it appears that it will be minimally visible from the public right-of-way. Based upon the quality of materials selected for this project and the general architectural direction, we recommend conceptual approval of this application as well as the application for 24 Bennett Street. Thank you.
And we'll go to Erin Minigan next.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the opportunity to have met with the applicant on site to discuss this proposal. We are encouraged by the restoration of the historic lot pattern on this corner and feel this is a well-conceived, contextually appropriate design. As this project moves forward, we would encourage continued study of the proportion of the front porch to lighten the appearance of the facade, specifically by enlarging the porch opening and thinning the wall dimensions surrounding the porch. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other public comment, how about staff comments?
Staff are supportive of this project for several reasons. The context of Bennett Street will be returned to its historic lot pattern on this corner of Bennett and Gadsden. The proposal embodies a thoughtful and appropriate design for the corner. Material palette and finishes are thoughtful and elevated, and this building acts as an anchor to the corner and will activate and take lead for future development or nearby redevelopment of this area. So staff's comments are, number one, according to the height district regulations, the ornamental appurtenance can occupy 30% of the total footprint of the floor below. Ensure the measure is met and remove the wet bar, which is another requirement. Two, consider elevating the material of the foundation or the retaining wall with brick. And three, the porch proportions would be improved by widening the opening of the recessed porch and deepening it by 6 to 12 inches. Consider recessing the garage doors to add some depth into the foundation. And so the staff is recommending conceptual approval of final review by staff.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Aaron, any clarification of public or staff comments?
No, I'll just say that we're happy to study those comments as well as those from the Preservation Society.
All right, so let's go to board discussion then.
This is Bill. I'll go ahead and start off. I think it's a very creative solution. I think it's elegantly detailed, and I do like the buildings a lot. I do agree with the staff's comments and recommendation. I guess the only one that I might have a little bit of question about, but I think it would work either way, would be comment number 2 about the retaining wall detailing with brick. I believe it could go either way. And also, I do agree with the widening of the porch openings, but only to some extent, because there is a sort of a vertical leg to those that has to hold off that cross piece, and you don't want that proportion to get out of scale. I think it's pretty close right now. A little bit wider would probably work, but maybe not too much wider. Anyway, it's a good job, and I agree again with staff's comments and recommendation.
Glenn Gardner, I am aligned with Bill on those comments. I would be careful not to widen the porch opening too much, because I think there is something about how it is done. I think that could be widened a little bit, but I would not push it too far.
I'm in agreement with Glenn and Bill. I think the proportions of the porch are probably very close, and if you get it too thin, it's going to those openings do I think blend and contribute to the general architecture of the building, and I think they might be widened a little bit, but I think I agree with Bill and Glenn on that. If you pushed it too far, I think you're starting to change the general architectural concept on the front of those buildings. I also think upgrading materials on the foundation retaining walls is great. I'm not sure brick is the right solution there. I think that a smooth finish really blends well with the material palette above the foundation. So with that said, I am in complete agreement with staff and my fellow board members.
Okay, which one of y'all wants to take a shot at a motion?
I can go ahead and do it, and I will, just to clarify for the other board members, if I will be saying that I recommend this motion with staff's comments, just because comment number 2 says consider elevating brick, material with brick. So that's your, consider that too. So I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with staff's comments and final review by staff.
Okay, Bill's made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Glenn seconded it, and I'll put it to a vote. Bill?
Yeah.
Glenn?
Yay in favor?
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
All right, chair votes yay in favor. Motion carries unanimously. So next agenda item is 24 Bennett.
24 Bennett is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a single-family dwelling with additional height based on architectural merit and context. Again, it's new construction in the Charleston Village neighborhood in the Old and Historic District. And I'm just gonna fly by these context slides again because you know what I'm talking about. And if Jeffrey and Aaron want to take it from here.
Really just, we appreciate the board's thoughtfulness on the 28 Bennett plans and the kind words. And just as a point of note, all of our contiguous neighbors have sent in glowing letters of approval and just are delighted to see this plan take shape. So with that, toss it to Ms. Lanier. Thank you.
So as you saw in our renderings, the overall design and approach to number 24 is the same. There are just some subtle differences in the site layout as well as the rooftop enclosure. So if you'll skip through the duplicative context slides, we can start on the proposed site layout. So as you can see here, the driveway for this lot will connect to Bennett rather than Gadsden. We're obviously trying to be mindful of the 31-inch live oak at the rear of the parcel. The materials will be the same with an eye towards permeability, and the retained grade and front steps will work the same as next door. If you want to go now to the roof plan at A102. So recognizing that number 24 would have neighbors on both sides that we want to be respectful of, and also just keeping in mind that there would be a more limited view to the south, we've reoriented the enclosure by essentially rotating it 90 degrees. This makes the east and west walls more solid, but also increases the distance back from the front facade by another 6.5 feet. So again, reducing visibility from the street. It hasn't changed for me. Is that just me?
Yeah, I think you've faded in and out.
Okay, I apologize, y'all. So you can better see that change in orientation here where it steps behind the chimney. And then if you go to the next slide, here we're almost 21 feet back from the front facade. Next slide. This is our east elevation, so the side closest to our historic neighbor at 22 Bennett. And then if you want to, again, flip through our streetscapes and renderings. If you'll go to the last one, Kim. Here, I just want to note that after we submitted this, we realized the rooftop enclosure, as you see it here, is actually representative of the location and orientation of the enclosure at number 28. So in reality, the front wall of the enclosure would be another 6.5 feet back from what is shown here. Again, we appreciate your review of these two houses. Our team is really proud of these designs, and we think they will play an important role in bringing together the architectural fabric of this part of the neighborhood and restore some much needed vibrancy to this corner. And that's all I have, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions on this application?
Aaron, this is Bill. I guess I didn't bring it up on the previous just because it's more addressing the corner and then this structure, but regarding this elevation of grade, which again, I think is a creative solution, and the effect to the neighbor, is there any issue with that from a flood zone perspective? Have you gone to any, I guess, is there any potential exacerbation of an issue for that neighbor regarding flood or floodwaters that you guys have talked with? I see you have a comprehensive engineered plan, so I didn't know if that.
I can, with regard to, there's certainly no exacerbation. We have had extensive discussions with the neighbor, Bobby Rose and Tom Yusufari, and they are delighted that we have come up proactively in advance, along with the architectural plan, a very thoughtful drainage plan from what we consider to be the best civil engineers that we've worked with for certainly a decade and a half on projects downtown. Additionally, when we had built Charleston Row, we used the same type of protocols and our neighbor who wrote in with a wonderful letter of support, Jeff Tibbles, used to be section chief, South Carolina Bar Association for Property Rights. And he's very familiar with our efforts on how we control the flooding and are responsible neighbors. So we did this proactively, and this mitigates any runoff on the Bobby Rose and Tom Yusuf area, 22 Bennett, and they are delighted that we took these efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other board questions, how about public comment?
We have one member of the public speaking, and then we also have a letter that Jeffrey reminded me of that Jay, I just emailed to you. So check your email while. We'll go to Aaron Minigan first.
Thanks. Erin Minigan, President of the Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to again thank the applicant for hosting us on site and reiterate our comments from the previous building pertaining to the success of the overall design direction and suggested restudy of the porch proportions. Thank you.
Alex, I'm still waiting on an email. Give me a minute.
Let me make sure it went through. Hold on. Yeah, you should be getting it.
All right, got the letter.
Jay, you're muted.
All right, let's try that again. Letter from Jeff Tibbles at 21 Bennett, across the street from the subject property. Jeff Roberts from the development team has shared with me his plans to transform the now vacant lot into 2 single-family homes with a pleasant architectural design. I'm in favor of the project because I believe that scale and density is appropriate for the neighborhood. Plans consistent with the original lots platted by Halsey Lumber in the early 1900s, and I'm informed that the engineering studies associated with the project show a significant reduction in stormwater runoff and flooding if the development plan is implemented. I'm familiar with Mr. Roberts, his work, particularly in connection with the townhome project at Bennett and Gadsden, adjacent to 21 Bennett. In my experience, Mr. Roberts is a good neighbor and delivers on his promises. Accordingly, I'm in favor of BAR approval for the project. If you have any questions, please call me, Jeffrey Tibbles. Okay, Aaron, or let's go to staff comments.
Staff are supportive, again, of this project for several reasons. The context of Bennett Street will be returned to its historic lot pattern on the corner of Bennett and Gadsden. Also, the proposal embodies a thoughtful and appropriate design for the corner. The material palette and finishes are thoughtful and elevated. And the architecture will set the standard for any future development or redevelopment in the area. Again, we reiterate our comments from 28 Bennett. According to the height district regulations, the ornamental appurtenance can occupy 30% of the footprint. So ensure that measure is met and remove the wet bar. Consider elevating the material of the foundation or the retaining wall with brick. The porch proportions would be improved by widening the opening of the recessed porch and deepening it by 6 to 12 inches. Also consider recessing the garage doors to add some depth to the foundation. We are again recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff. Thank you.
Aaron, anything to clarify?
No, thank you.
Board, anything to discuss?
I'll jump in again unless Glenn, you have something.
Bill, I'll just quickly say I generally would simply repeat the comments from before, but I guess my only question is the discussion that Aaron mentioned in the first presentation. Is there a desire to have any differentiation of material between these buildings, or would that only be an architectural downfall to try to decorate them differently? I think that's something for us to quickly comment on as a group.
Looked like the shutter colors were different, and I guess then the setup, and of course the rooftop structure, but it looked like they were sort of setting up a sister building scenario here, which I'm fine with in context of the fact that the building's kind of across the street as well, which is more kind of a townhome development, the rhythm of that. So to me, I think they work well together with maybe a slight difference of, highlight colors of shutters or other elements. I think that will pull it off in my mind.
Bill, I'm in agreement with you. I think that that there's, if you want to differentiate a little bit, there's subtle ways, as you mentioned, to do that, and I think they work really well as sister houses.
Yeah, would you just put it back on the 2 renderings? Maybe go one more back. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something elegant about that. So I agree with you, Bill.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion for conceptual approval with staff's comments noted and final review by staff.
Okay, Bill's made a motion. Is there a second?
I'm happy to second this one as well.
Okay, second by Glenn. I'll call the roll. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
In favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes yay in favor. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Alex, Kev, anything else, or is that a night?
And I have a question once we're only aboard, and then I'll keep it really quick. Look at Julia's empty seat. She's been at home for a half hour. Are we down?
Looks like it's just us. Yeah.
Yep.
I just simply had, since we were all, or most of us, still on here. Oh, there she is. Do we have any update with regarding a chair or a staff or anything like that?
So we do. Lindsay, sorry, remind me of her last name, Jay.
Van Slambrook.
Is going to be the mayor's recommendation. That will go to council next on the 10th, I believe. And city architect position, I know they're still interviewing, and I think that a couple of them have actually gone to the mayor for interview. So getting closer.
All right.
Jay, is this your last one, Jay?
December. My next one is going to be in, what, 2 weeks? A little over 2 weeks.
So you and Alex together are the last meetings next time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we got to find.
Can I make a motion that Jay can't leave until a new chair has been confirmed?
I second that.
Y'all, I think y'all will really like Lindsay. I've worked with her for 7 years, and she does what I do. She gets, what it's like to work with owners and architects and engineers and developers, and run the gamut. I think she's got a good head on her shoulders, and I guess this all assumes that council approves her, but and she's got the right temperament. So I couldn't pick or recommend a better person.
Thanks
Well,
for
you
doing
got
that,
big
Jay.
shoes to fill, Jay. Big shoes to fill, Jay.
Yep.
She
And,
knows Richard too. Yeah. So
That's
the
very
whole thing.
cool.
Yeah.
I'd be up for having a drink after the next meeting with Alex too, if he'll come. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
For sure. Let's definitely do it. I'm in.
All right.
It can happen.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. Good night.
Thank you so
All right.
much, y'all. Have a great night and happy
Good night.
Thanksgiving.
See you.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Good night.